What is up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Travis. Of course, this is TWA Motorsports, and today, well, we're back on my son's G8. So if you guys haven't caught any of these videos, this is my son's first car. He will be turning 16 in about 6 weeks, so we're getting down to crunch time here. And I didn't want to buy him a V8, found him a V6. He liked this car, he wanted a car, and he's pretty excited about it. So he was really gung-ho when we started. He came out and clay barred the whole thing. That's why you see kind of the marring on the paint. But we've done a few things to it. So we cleaned it up a little bit in some spots, took all the vent visors off. We pulled the back seats out because the rear third brake light was messed up. I was able to get a new brake light, but I left all that stuff apart because we pulled the old window tint off. It was old and nasty, and it is now re-tinted. So I decided to go with 20% all the way around. I didn't want him to have it as dark as what we normally would have our cars, just because he's a new driver, and but it looks better. And so it is tinted now, and obviously, like I said, we still need to do the paint. But the reason it's down here in the shop is we're wanting to do something with the brakes. So, and you'll see why, well, for a couple reasons. One, there's a little bit of a lip on them, and I want them to have some new brakes. So we are gonna be installing some new brakes today. That's what I'm gonna be showing you guys. And ever since he found this car, you can see that marring like I'm talking about, and then you can see the spot that I paint corrected right here. But ever since he found this car, he really liked the look of the Camaro wheels on it. And so I found him a set of Camaro wheels, which is, they're sitting over here. I got him some new tires. Look, I feel like I've spent a small fortune on this car at this point, because I bought these wheels. They were pretty rough. They were the factory polish, but they had curb rash on majority of them. So I took them to my local powder coat guy, and I'll list his information down below. He's relatively close to me. He's in the Springfield, Missouri area. And guys, he does an amazing job. He's the same guy that did the headers on my Trans Am over there. He does ceramic coating, and of course he does powder coating as well. But he powder coated these wheels, got all the curb rash out of them. And of course, these tires won't work. So we got some new tires. So we'll be installing these. The other reason, though, other than the lip and wanting the wheels, is those wheels show a lot more of the brakes, and these brakes are old and rusty. And so my son kind of wanted to paint the brake calipers. So here's what I'm hoping. He's at basketball practice right now. I'm hoping to get it all disassembled. I'm gonna make him clean and paint the rotors, or sorry, the calipers. I've got new rotors coming. I've got new brake pads coming, which you guys will see. I don't even have them yet, but I figured we'd go ahead and get it disassembled, cleaned up, and start painting on it. And then when they show up, we can just put them back together. So either way, that is the plan. And so you guys are gonna be seeing a couple videos on this, because like I said, I'm down to crunch time. I got 6 weeks until he's driving. So we want to get all this stuff complete and then get it paint corrected so he's ready to go. Like, he, you know, it's just like it should have been to begin with. But either way, let's get this thing off the ground and see if we can get the tires off, the wheels off, or the wheels and tires off, and the brakes off. Now, one of the things I wanted to show you is there's not a ton of great places to jack on these. You can notice there's not really a frame. If you put your jack in there on that, what looks like a frame rail, it will bend up. So what I do is, right here where kind of like the K-member bolts in, that's where I like to lift. You can see I've got a jack on both sides. Now I'm gonna see if we can maneuver a jack stand kind of close to that, and then we'll take our jack to the back. I'll show you where I like to jack there. So here in the back, I like to lift from the center of the differential here. And then you have a couple different options as far as jack stands once you get the center of the differential up. Just be careful. Obviously, you know, you have a ton of A-arm drop when you lift it up this way. So it takes a little bit to get it off the ground. But once you do that, let's get some jack stands under it to secure it, and then we'll roll these jacks out of the way. Now that we got it all the way off the ground, we can go ahead and get the wheels and tires off. I just chose to put my jack stands under that rear mount. You see that back here? It's probably kind of hard to see with no light, but there's a mount right there. Got a pretty long jack stand. I left the jack in place as well. So got a couple things holding it. Either way, we need to take these little caps off that hold this on, and it's missing some in some spots. You can just use some pliers or a flathead screwdriver and pop those off. Then we can get the wheels and tires off. Now on the front wheel here, I'm gonna take these apart separate. So I'm gonna take the caliper off and then the bracket off. This is a 12 millimeter right here. So we're gonna take it off, and then you should be able to unclip this and lay that kind of on the ground. You know, normally you don't wanna put a ton of pressure on these, but I think if we unclip this here, we'll have enough pressure for it to get on the ground. If not, I'll bring a block of wood or something over here to set it on, because we are going to be putting it back on, but I want him to be able to clean this and this separate. We may end up spraying this, since it may be a little bit easier, and we can take the slide pins out, make sure everything's greased up really well. But yeah, I want to take them apart separately, because we want to get the rotor out of the way, and like I did on the truck, I want to have it bolted up so he can, you know, have something to paint against. So we'll get this off with the 12. So you can see once I got those out, I was able to lay it kind of up against my jack stand down there. So you just twist this with the line and it'll come right out of that clip. So now we need to get the two 18 millimeters back here. So there's two 18s that hold the brake caliper bracket on, and you can either go ahead and take your brake pads out, or you can you know, leave them in and take them out with the bracket. I mean, they're coming out eventually anyway, as well as the hardware as well. So let's get the 18s out. Once we have that off, there's no real retainer, guys. Like, you know, on my trucks, they have like a T30 or something that goes in there to keep these things kind of in place as they set the brake on, but these are not like that. So you may have to get like a small sledgehammer and knock around on it, but we should be able to go ahead and pull this thing off once we tap around on it. You know, after time it rusts in the center there, and then of course it's a snug fit anyway. So let's go ahead, grab my hammer and tap around on this and get this off. That didn't take much. I just tapped it a couple times around the side and then tapped on this open area and it came right off. So the other thing is, normally you would have your backing plate sandwiched in between your wheel bearing, so your hub assembly here, and your spindle, but it's not like that on this. So there's just three 10 millimeters that hold that thing in place, and as gross as it looks, I'm just going to take those out, have him clean those up as well, and we'll respray those. That'll make things look a little nicer as well. You can see I got this thing off, so that'll be easy to clean up and scuff up and just shoot with some Rust-Oleum or something. But now we've got all the front as disassembled, so it's not too bad, to be honest with you. The worst part's going to be the cleaning and the painting, because you know, you have to brush that paint on, and I'll show you what we're going to use here in a little bit. But I'm going to go ahead and do the other side. On the driver's side, I wanted to show you guys one axle, because they could be different. Obviously the other side's not, so I'm going to go knock it out, and then we'll move to the back and we'll show you if there's anything different. It should be a little bit different back there, but I'll show you here in just a second. Now we're on to the back, and honestly guys, it's pretty much the same thing. You're going to have two 12 millimeters. Now you can't get your impact in there like you could up in the front, so you're going to have to use like a ratcheting wrench is what I'm going to use, a 12 millimeter ratcheting wrench. Also, if this center piece starts to spin, I put an 18 on it, and that'll keep that from spinning, so you can get that the rest of the way out. And then 18 millimeter is also what we're going to be using on the bracket itself. And I'm just going to lay this thing up on top of the A-arm if this doesn't want to come loose. Other than that, you may have to hit a little harder here on the back, because it generally has more wear and it has the e-brake on the inside here. But once we get that stuff off, I'll show you kind of what we've got. There is a rubber piece right here that has nothing to do with keeping this on. So even if you see that and think you have to pull that out, you do not have to do that. You can see I've got the two 18s out to hold the bracket, and then the two 12s out, obviously, that hold the caliper. But we're gonna use a pretty good sized sledgehammer here and just kind of wrap around on this to get it started to get loose. So you don't have to loosen the axle, this axle nut in the center. This comes off around the outside. So we're gonna go ahead and use this area back here. Obviously there's a plate all the way around except the opening where the caliper was at. We're gonna use that spot to tap, and we're going to spin, tap, and we're just going to repeat that process until this comes off. Now this may take a little bit, guys. It probably wouldn't hurt to put some WD-40 here if you wanted to kind of loosen that up. You don't have to, but it may make things a little easier on you. Once we have all those off, we can go ahead and take our brake pads out. Now, one thing to keep in mind is, if you don't remember, these wear indicators, you see that on the brake pad there, those all go on the inside. So they would be closest to the interior of the car. The outside ones do not have a wear indicator on them. So we can go ahead and take these out. And then we can also take our brake hardware out. That one, first one fell out. As far as taking the guide pins out, I'm not gonna take those out yet. I'm gonna use those to kind of keep paint and junk out of there. And I'm gonna tape them off. But once we go back together after they're painted, then we'll show you how we take these out, make sure they're clean, debris free, and they're moving. And these actually move really well, but I'm still gonna take them out and put some additional grease in them. At this point, he came out here and I guess he used a wire brush. I told him to use a wire brush on the calipers, so you can see them down there. Quite a bit came off of those. That's what we're using, is a wire brush and then a Scotch-Brite. So going over it with the wire brush, then cleaning it with brake clean, and then going over it with the Scotch-Brite. So we've went over all the calipers at this point. And remember, I told you guys that I'm gonna paint the brake caliper brackets separately. So I'm gonna spray those outside. I've got them all hanging right here, ready to go. And then I zip tied those front dust shields. So he's already scuffed all these up, and he used some, I think 220 grit sandpaper, the wire brush, and then we went over them again with a Scotch-Brite. So I've got them all cleaned up. I used some just alcohol to clean off any excess that we didn't see. Now look, they don't have to be perfect, guys. Honestly, if you wanted them perfect, you should probably powder coat them. But they're gonna look way better than what he's got now. This old nasty metal with a bunch of brake dust on it. So we're gonna spray these outside with some Rust-Oleum. That's all I'm gonna use, some gloss Rust-Oleum. But as he starts to paint these, I will break back in and show you guys what we're using as far as to paint the calipers themselves. It's kind of one of those things where we gotta do it quickly. We have about 2 hours. And but either way, I'll show you what product we're going to use and kind of how we're going to go about doing this. But I want to get the brackets painted first and let them dry. That way we can bolt them up and then put the caliper on for when we're painting it. And you'll see what I'm talking about as we go there. But either way, let's I'm going to have him come back out here, go over these rotors, or sorry, the calipers one more time, and then we'll cut back in and talk about the product we're going to use and kind of how we're going to go about it. I've got them mounted, and the reason I've got them mounted is because in order to paint these, I'm going to be holding the front of the caliper to paint the back. And so that what I'm using, which we're going to look at in just a second, it all has to be done within 2 hours. So I'm going to hold the front of the caliper with the glove on. I'm going to paint the back. I'm going to go do that around the whole vehicle. And then once I'm done with that, I'm going to start over and paint a second coat on them. And then once I'm finished with the second coat, I'm going to use my bolts here that you see back there. I'm going to bolt the caliper on, and then I'm going to paint the front of it. So obviously I'm not putting my hand in wet paint. And so we got to go around and do that twice as well. So it's not something that you can like put together and then leave and come do, you know, one a night or whatnot, because the product that we're using requires you to do it all at once. And that product is G2 Caliper Paint. Now, I've used this a couple times in the past. The last video I used, I actually got the matching color for my truck. So my truck calipers are painted the same color as the truck. And I did those a little bit differently. I painted those on. I took the rotors off. And but the calipers, I didn't love that I couldn't get in certain areas. So I like this method better because it gives you the ability to, you know, to get on the very back of them. On those, I was trying to, you know, put my head in the fender and see with a light. It just wasn't the best setup for that. But either way, the way this stuff mixes, it's got a hardener in it. And so you take this, this is just black, by the way. You can get special colors in this, but I'll list this in the description if you're just wanting black. I do like this better than what I used on my truck out there, because the stuff that I used on my truck, the POR 15, it just paints on a little thicker. This stuff is almost like water, so you have your color, depending on what color you chose, and then you dump this hardener in it. They call it reactor, hardener, whatever. And it does come with a brush. It comes with a microfiber and some brake clean as well. I used way more than what they send. They send one bottle of brake clean. I used way more than that cleaning these, and then I also kind of scuffed them up with the Scotch-Brite. So went over them a couple times, cleaned them a couple times. They are ready to go right now. I'm just waiting on my shop to get just a hair warmer. You do want to do it where it's like, I'd say probably 60 degrees is the threshold. So if you're doing it outside, make sure you do it in the summer or a day that it's going to be 60 degrees. But we're going to get started on this. I don't know how much of this I'll show you. I may show you some time lapse of me painting one, probably on the other side because I have the best lighting over there for you guys to see. But I'm not going to show you guys me going around all of them, but I wanted to show you kind of what we were using and the process that I'm going to be doing. I've got an extra box here just so I'm not putting a ton of pressure on the brake line. But so we're going to mix these two together. Like I said before, there's a little more time than I thought. It's actually 4 to 6 hours of time, but you need to pour this in. It comes with a stir stick. You stir it up. You give it about 5 minutes to react, and then you stir it one more time, and then you're ready to go. So we're gonna get started here. I'm gonna start, I'm actually gonna start on the other side, and then when I get to this side, I'll turn the camera on, let you guys kind of watch the process. It does, like I said, come with a brush. If you don't like that, you can use another brush. You're not putting on a lot. You're putting on really, really thin coats, and just making sure that you're covered, and then you need to wait at least 15 minutes between each coat, which will give me time to go from here, obviously, to the back. By the time I get back around, we should be 15 minutes should be well past. So that's the hope anyway. So like I said, we'll turn you back on and time lapse when I get to this one, and then obviously once we're all finished, I'll show you what the finished product looks like. Well, as you can see, I've got the second coat on, and it's looking pretty good, guys. I will tell you, and I did go over the center of this because it was all rusty. I will tell you that, you know, on the second coat, it does want to drag a little bit. I think, you know, honestly, if a guy had a little longer wait time between, probably be a little better, but it's looking pretty good. There's some spots that I don't like that I'm probably gonna go over it one more time. I'm gonna let it dry for about an hour. I know it says 15 minutes, but there, you know, with that brush, it's kind of hard to not pile it up. But I will tell you that, you know, it paints on like water. It does paint on pretty smooth, and it's pretty self-leveling. But, you know, at the same time, the second coat, because sometimes it gets kind of thick, you know, it wants to drag because it's not quite dry. So I'm gonna let it dry for maybe an hour, maybe 2 hours. I'm about 2 hours into this process, and so I've got, you know, a couple hours left on dry time. So probably about the hour mark, I'm gonna come out. I'm just gonna go over the top and the front, and I did go over a couple spots that it looked like were kind of light on the bracket. You know, I sprayed it outside, but all in all, it's gonna look good for what we're doing, that's for sure. Okay, at this point, guys, you can see that we have got all the calipers painted. Well, I guess you can just see one, but either way, I'm gonna take the bolts back out of it, if I can get them out without having to get a wrench. And then I'm gonna take the brackets off, because obviously we need to reassemble this with the new parts. So I'm just gonna kind of set this to the side for now. And I'm actually gonna set it on a towel so it's not like banging. And I just literally, they look pretty good. Pretty impressed. They always do That G2 stuff's pretty good stuff. But I need to take these 18s out, get this bracket off, because I am gonna pull these out, make sure that they're nice and clean, and re-grease those up. So, but before I do that, we obviously need to take those 18s out, get that out, and then I may go ahead and grab the rotor. We'll talk about what brake kit or what brakes that we're putting on it. For brakes, it's pretty much no surprise, guys. I use this on just about everything. These power stop brake pads and rotors, there's a couple things I like about them. One thing, they just look really, really nice. They're zinc washed, and so they just don't get rust other than this surface once it starts to scratch, obviously from braking. You know, then it'll rust there, but then one pass and they look good. So they're always gonna be really nice looking around the outside. The vanes will always look nice. The hats will always stay looking nice. And that's generally why I use those. The other thing is their pads that I chose to go with. There's different style of pads. Now, I'm gonna list all this stuff in the description down below, obviously. But I'm gonna list this. This is a 6-cylinder car. 6 cylinders do use different braking sets than the V8 car. So I'll list both in case you're wanting to get this. But all in all, I've had really good luck with these. They do have a break-in period, which if you guys want to look back in the videos in the past, I show you how to do that. I probably won't show you in this video, but 5 aggressive decelerations from 40 to 10, and then 5 immediately following that from 35 to 5, and that's moderate. And then you want to drive for at least 5 minutes without touching the brakes. So you need an area where you can do that. Like I said, I probably won't show you guys that, but there is a break-in procedure. But the pads, these are the I believe they're the Z26 pads. They're meant more for like a daily driver. This car isn't obviously a V8 car. It doesn't go that fast. I mainly wanted to clean up the look here and keep the brake dust down so the wheels stay looking nice. But either way, we got that on there. It does tell you front, driver's side, obviously. Each one of them has a sticker on it. You can take those off if you'd like. But the next thing I want to do is it does come with new pieces of rubber here, and these actually look really, really good. See these, how they have grease on them? There's no dirt in them. I might put a little more caliper grease on there, but it does come with new boots. And I'll probably go ahead and put those on there since, you know, they're here. And not a whole lot to it. They just slide on and slide off the old ones. If I can get them open. Maybe getting them open is the hardest part. But if yours have any kind of cracks, which these don't, but the car has enough miles on it and age, I'm assuming these are probably the originals. So I am going to go ahead and put new ones on while I'm doing all this. But let's go grab some caliper grease and put a little more grease on those, and then we'll slide this back together. I did want to show you kind of how these went together. So this old rubber piece here, you can see it pulls open and out, and then we can just yank this guy off, set it to the side, and then we will grab the new one, and the big end goes out. So you see what we've got here. We're gonna press this in, slide it up around where it's fitting. See how it fits up against that? And the new one is on. So obviously you need some towels because you're gonna make a mess while doing this, but then we could put some caliper grease on and just push them right back in that bracket. And I really probably didn't even need to put grease on these, but since they're out, and when I pulled those old pieces of rubber off, some of the old stuff came with it. So you will have to push these down, and then you'll have to get those rubber pieces seated back on this. It may take you a minute to do that. There we go. Same thing on this one. And this bracket is almost ready to go back on. Now there's one other thing that I want to do while I've got this, and that is we're going to put the new hardware in. The kit comes with new hardware. Now you can, if you didn't get new hardware, you do have the option to clean up your old. I'm going to try to cut this open, but we're going to snap this in and put a little bit of grease where the pad's going to slide as well. Now this should be just like your old stuff, so it should slide in may take a little bit. Holy cow. A lot of spring to these clips. More spring than I've seen on other clips. But you can see that slides in there. We need to put the other one on the other side. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna put a little bit of caliper grease right here. So where that pad slides, I'm gonna dab some in there. And I may go grab a Q-tip, so I'm not trying to get that big brush in there, but I'm gonna put some there, and then I'm gonna go ahead and put the bracket up in place and get the bolts started. I probably will use just a little bit of blue Loctite on these guys, and then we'll talk about the torque specs once we get all this together. The only specs I have are for the V8, which these should be the same as far as the knuckles and the bolts. 44 foot-pounds and then 120 degrees past that. Now guys, look, I don't have a fancy torque wrench. I need one that measures degrees, so I'm just gonna mark it and go from there. But 44 on both those, and then we can put the pads in, which I'm just gonna show you guys. I'm gonna go ahead and torque this down to 44 plus the 120. And I did put a little Loctite on those, if that makes you feel a little more comfortable. And which my son's driving this. I want it to be safe, so I definitely wanted to put some on there. But I'm gonna go ahead and get this done, and then we'll move on to the brake pads. Onto the brake pads, they are different. So you can see this one here has your wear indicator on it. That actually goes on the inside. Remember I said that when we took the old ones apart to try to remember where those went. So we need to put this pad in place, and then I am going to put a little bit of grease on the back of this once I get it in place, just to keep it from making noise. And then I'll also put some on the inside of the caliper here to keep it from making noise. I'm hoping we don't have to squeeze the caliper down. I do have my pliers over here if we do, but let's go ahead and just snap these in, and they just set in these little channels. I'll show you with this one here. That just goes here and then slides in there. That's pretty much all there is to it. And then we'll, like I said, put some grease on them and slide the caliper on. A couple things you need to watch for. This little bitty clip on the outside of the hardware that we installed, you need to make sure you don't bend it over when you're pushing the pad in. I noticed on the back, because I couldn't see as well, I actually bent this one and the pad wasn't setting in there right. So make sure that you kind of pull this up. I was able to bend it back out, by the way, but make sure you kind of pull this up. It's easier to pull or push against one, and then on the other side, kind of stick your finger in there or a flathead screwdriver and kind of pull this up while you're shoving the pad in. But I will tell you that I am going to have to adjust or push the pistons back in. I've got just a pair of C-clamp vice grips. I'm going to go grab one of the old pads. We're going to set it in here, and then we're going to compress this, and hopefully it'll slide on at that point. It only took like one little push on that to get it where it needs to be. So now I'm going to put a little bit of caliper grease here, and then I'm going to put some in the middle where those pistons ride on the back. Once we do that, we can swing it up in place and get our bolts in. And guys, these bolts, they're almost screws, I'd call them, they're so small. But these go to 31 foot-pounds. And they already have some Loctite left on them. I'm not gonna put any more on them. Just gonna put them in here, get them started, hopefully, and get this thing torqued down. Now the last thing I wanna do is I'm gonna take some brake clean, and I'm gonna wipe this. Now normally, a lot of people do this when they're installing them. The reason I don't is because a lot of times you'll inadvertently get caliper grease on them. And so I like to wipe both sides off. So we got a nice clean surface, and there wasn't a whole lot there. But the last thing we need to do before we put the wheel on is we need to put our brake line back in its little holder here. And I'm hoping I can get it in there without having to take the caliper back off. I think I will be able to. I have to go get a pair of pliers, but either way, we'll get this in place, and we can grab the wheel, guys, and we'll talk about, you know, the wheel and tire setup. Yeah, I'm gonna have to grab a pair of pliers, I think. I should have probably put that in before I swung the rotor or the caliper up into place, but we'll get it. Well, here's the exciting part, guys. Down to the wheels, And yeah, these are actually Camaro wheels. So off of 5th gen Camaro, 20 by 8s in the front, 20 by 9.5 in the back. Tire size for the front, 245, 35, 20. Pretty common size for a G8, okay? In the back, I wanna say we're doing a 245, 75, but when we get it all finished, I'll take a look at the tires and we'll talk about those. But either way, this is what my son really wanted. He wanted these wheels, and I don't blame him. They are a good looking wheel. Now, I did buy these things polished. They were really beat up. I got a decent deal on them, not a smoking deal in my opinion, but I had my local powder guy repowder coat them, and man, he does just an incredible job. So it's just gonna look so much better. And obviously we got new tires. I put new TPMS sensors. I will list all of this stuff in the description down below. But the other thing is I didn't want to reuse the factory lug nuts because, well, they're ugly. And they had those ugly, if you remember, those plastic caps on them. And I didn't love that either. Holy cow, that is a tight fit. So I've got actually ones off of a Silverado that I had. The Silverado and this are actually the same bolt pattern. The other thing though is obviously they came with Chevy caps. Well, this isn't a Chevy and that looks goofy. This little tedious stuff like this makes me crazy. So I actually ordered Solstice or G6 center caps. And so that is what we are going to be using on it. We're gonna put those on there. And then I need to snug this wheel down at least to get it seated. I'm gonna go around, do all the brakes, put all the wheels on. We're gonna set it down, step back and take a look at it. And yeah, it's gonna look great. So take a look at that. I know I said I'd show you guys when we're all finished. I'm not finished, but just wheels and brakes. So that just, and we need to clean the fender wells. This thing's absolutely filthy. I drove it in the rain last, so that's why it's so dirty, but we'll take care of that when we finish this. But guys, like I said, I'll list all this stuff in the descriptions, from the center caps to the lug nuts. Like I said, are off the Silverado 14 by 1.5, 20-inch Camaro wheels, and the tires. Just a great looking package with the brakes. Definitely makes it pop with that non-rusted brake caliper and non-rusted brake rotor back behind it. It just sets the look in my opinion. But either way, I'm gonna go blast through the rest of it. Like I said, I'm not gonna show you guys that, and then we'll take a look at it once we set it on the ground. We'll talk about wheel specs, tire specs, and whatnot all the way around. Back over here on the driver's side, you notice I have it apart, and that is because, guess what I forgot to put in? So I had to take it all apart just for this bracket. Now, chances are, guys, it's just a backing plate to keep dirt and debris out, but I can't do things without doing it right. So I took it all back apart, even though I didn't love doing that. And so all we got to do is just snug these down. Don't put a ton on these. There's not a lot to them. If you put too much on them, you'll snap them off. I'm just going to snug them down. And then, of course, we'll go back together all the same specs that we had before. Just sucks. Sometimes I got to the other side and realized, wait a minute, there's something I'm missing here. And I had them hanging up, still drying from when I painted them. But we'll get it back together here, and we should be set to show you guys it all on the ground. At this point, we got it on the ground, and it's definitely looking a lot better with the new brakes, new wheels, new tires. So I told you we're gonna talk about the tire sizes and whatnot, but we have a ton of fender gap, and so I'm gonna have him move it back and forth. But anytime you push those pistons back in on your calipers, you need to get in and pump up the brakes. Otherwise, you're gonna put it in gear, it's gonna drive right through the wall of your shop or anywhere else, wherever you've got it close to another car. So get in, pump the brakes up, make sure you got a good firm brake pedal before you try to move it back and forth. But once we do that, I still haven't torqued the wheels. We need to torque the wheels, and we need to set the new TPMS sensors. I'm really hoping that they work. They are brand new, but I did buy them off Amazon, so we will see, and I'll link those in the description as well. But yeah, to get rid of some of this fender gap and kind of get a better look at what it's going to look like, I do want to back it up. But I did want to tell you guys about that, because in the past, I worked on something for a day and then quit. And then when I went to put it on the ground for the first time, I actually just about drove off. I actually had to go through my yard and circle my yard a couple times to get it to stop. So don't do the same thing that I've done in the past. So we'll get it started, and then we'll go through the tire relearn process. We'll get the wheels torqued. We'll talk about that. But I'm gonna have him do this first. Definitely looking a lot better with less gap. I think it'll settle a little bit more once we get it outside. I just had him back it up back and forth in the shop. And there's obviously not a lot of room in the front and the back, but we're gonna see if we can use my little tool here and get the tire pressure sensor set. Hop in there, turn the key to run, don't start it, and then hold the lock and unlock button at the same time.
On the key?
On the key while you're trying. So turn it on, hold the lock and unlock button at the same time. It should go into tire learn. All right, so that should get us where we need to be. Now let's see if our new sensors work. Man, I hope they work. Ooh, there's one. You want to start in the driver's side front. And every time you hear the horn honk, that means one's set. Oh, okay. You generally have 2 minutes to do this. I'm probably rushing it, but. So now we should have good tire pressure. So turn the key off. Take it out. Now start it back up. And we should have no tire pressure sensor light now, unless we have a low tire. Yep, it's gone. No more light. Sweet. Okay. All right. At this point, guys, I'm gonna wait until the next morning. We'll pull it outside, and we'll take a look at it then. Talk about the sizes of the tires. Like I said, I think these require 140 foot-pounds of torque on the wheels. So I'm gonna go ahead and torque those down, and then we'll get it outside and take a look around it with the new setup. I know I told you guys I was gonna take it outside. The problem is the wind is blowing like 40 miles an hour today, so I can't get an area where the mic's just not catching a crazy amount of wind noise. So we're just gonna have to talk about it here. We are finished. I did torque the wheels to 125, guys. I know I said 140, it's actually 125, but it is looking so much better. He's so excited about the look, and I told you we talk about the wheel sizes. There's a couple other things I want to talk about as well. So wheel size and tire size. So the front's a 20 by 8 inch wheel. The tire size is a 245 35 20. For the back, it is a 275 30 20, and it's on a 20 by 9 inch wheel. These are factory SS Camaro wheels off like a 2010 and up Camaro, and it does look way better. I have to agree. You know, when he got this car, of course he wanted a V8, and I wasn't going to let him loose in a V8, but he said, I want Camaro wheels and I want the windows tinted. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about, obviously this looks so much better. I knew that wheel was going to be nice and open, so I didn't want that ugly rusty brake behind these new powder coated wheels. So that's why we did the brakes. The brakes weren't bad, but I think these will stop a little better, and obviously they look a lot nicer with that black and that zinc washed rotor. So either way, but the last thing I want to talk about, there was one other thing that he wanted, and obviously we need to do some paint correction. That's the last step of this car. But when he got this, he's a teenager, so he said, I want some subwoofers. And we thought we were going to surprise him at Christmas with it, but we decided last night to bring him out here and show him. But I spent all day yesterday installing subs in this thing, and it's still kind of ratty because I haven't got the final placement, but I got them working. Everything hooked up, all the wires ran. I just don't have them tucked up nice and neat and trimmed the way I like it. But I'm going to show you guys anyway. We found a couple subwoofers used, and honestly, guys, that's the best way to buy them. If you can find something that is in good shape used, buy it that way because it's so much cheaper, because these are really expensive to buy. They're 12W3s. The amp is actually on the back. But there's a new thing that I wanted to talk about that I used and I've never used before, and that is this LC2i Pro from Audio Control. And so this allows you to add a subwoofer and amp to a factory system. Now, what's really cool about this, you've seen these line output converters you can buy at like Walmart or the cheapies. This one is really cool in the fact that it does a few things that I've never seen. One of them is it will take up to 400 watts in. So you can go post amplifier, like on your, maybe a Bose system or a setup that has a huge amplifier for the regular speakers. You can tag into that, run it into this, and it'll accept up to 400 watts. That's one really cool thing. The other cool thing, and I'm gonna show you inside here. You can see all my mess of wires, but it's mounted up there above the amplifier. But the other cool thing is when it recognizes that the thing has signal, it will turn the amp on. So normally you would have to find a keyed 12 volt or switch 12 volts to key up your amplifier. This does that once it recognizes audio control. So all you have to do is run your speaker level in, and then it will recognize when you turn the radio on to turn the amp on. That is just awesome to me. And then it has a bass knob, obviously, that runs to the front when you don't want to hammer. And then it has some other really cool settings, which we probably won't get into, but some of the factory amps, as you turn the volume up, the bass will actually pull out to save your factory speakers, and this can override that. So you can change the settings on it to where it will put the bass back in instead of pulling it out. The factory does that to obviously save the factory components. But all in all, he was so excited. I really wish I could have set up a camera, but he would have known for sure something was going down if I'd have had a camera on while we all stood out here and watched him see this. But he was so jazzed. We did put some kill mat on before. I didn't tell him we were doing the sub stuff. I just told him, I said, hey, you know, when you get subs, you're gonna want something on there. So we put some kill mat on the deck lid. We don't have any of the panels back in. Well, not all of them anyway, as you can see inside, but we did the back side here, and then I did the package tray before we put it in. He came out here and helped lay all this stuff. So that should help things from rattling. We also put a piece on the license plate, but now I could tuck the wires in, make it look all nice, and, you know, make me feel a little better about it, because I cannot stand wires everywhere. But let me know what you guys think. He's jazzed. I'm jazzed for him. I think we're gonna probably move it up to the top garage at this point and start the paint correction, and then we will be finished with this. At least, hopefully. Maybe he won't break anything when he starts driving. So at least that's my hope. Hopefully this keeps him safe. But either way, we still have to bed the pads in. I haven't done that. That, like I said, this is the process that you saw in the box when I opened that. But if you guys did enjoy this video, please, like always, go down there and smash that thumbs up button. If you are not subscribed, please go down there, hit that subscribe button. Of course, ring the bell icon. That notifies you every single time we drop a new video. And stay tuned to see what we work on next.